Hello everyone. I'm now going to talk a little bit about drawing itself and how you create sort of a layout on the page and how you choose how to put your image into the format. First of all, it's really important to talk a little bit about drawing as an activity. You don't need to be scared of it. It's something that you learn naturally. It's a skill that you can learn, like sewing or cooking or something. The more you do, the better. And I really urge you to draw from life. It's very important because drawing from photographs is a nice thing, and sometimes it's justified because in some instances we don't have, let's say, a jumping dancer or a bird in flight or whatever as a reference, so we need to take a photograph, and that's perfectly normal. But in general, if you can, do some drawing from the real thing, do some urban sketching, sit in a cafe, draw a friend, take a glass of water or something. Do this and it will actually use a different part of your brain, or you will use a different part of your brain by doing that, than if you are just simply copying information by using a reference photo. That's why it's very important that you have a 3D object in front of you and that you think, okay, how can I put this into the format? So let's talk about formats first. Now this is my sketchbook, and we have paper in two different directions. Yeah, so let's take a page out. Yeah, this of course you shouldn't do. This is called portrait direction. Yeah, because you can imagine you can put a portrait on it, like me, right? And this here, this way around, would be landscape direction, because you can imagine this would lend itself to draw a nice sweeping landscape. Yeah. So first of all, you need to think of how you put your work onto this sheet. Yeah. We've got a little friend here who we are going to portray now, and who, needs to be represented. And the most important thing of this is that you decide first how you are actually putting the object, whatever it is, if that's a single object or a friend or a street or something, how are you putting it into your format? Are you using a single page or the double page in your book? Are you using only half of this? Are you using your sheet of paper? And working on loose sheets is actually not too bad, especially if you work with wet media like watercolors, because otherwise the water goes through and makes your book messy, or acrylics. So first of all, we need to think of how to put this guy here on the page, right? And I've got several options. So say this is my page. Yeah. I could, of course, say, okay, here's my bird, and here's the head, whatever, and the feet. There we go. I draw it so that it fits perfectly on here. Yeah, so full frame. Or you could zoom out and you say, well, in fact, I really like a lot of space around, so I'm going to put him only in this corner. I'm going to draw him very, very small, There we go. And this, all the space here, all of this that remains free, that can be free because it's called negative space, and it actually is very important for us how the negative space is constructed. And we are looking a lot at the actual shapes in here of this object if we are also having negative space, or even a composition with, let's say, there's a second goose somewhere around. Yeah, so that would be zooming out. And we could also zoom in, and we say, well, I don't want to see the whole bird, that's really quite boring. I actually want to only show parts of the wings. Yeah, so this would be the bird, but it doesn't fit on the page. So I'm only going to show these wings and the feathers and all the structure. Because after all, what we're doing here is we're creating an abstract representation of something. We're drawing. We're not taking a photograph. Yeah. And it is really up to you to decide what you put into this drawing, because it might be that this is what you wanted to show, the texture. You don't want to show the bird. You want to show the actual landscape that happens when you look at the feathers. Yeah, we're not doing an analytical drawing that is used for science. You know, we're doing something that is observational and to understand the details. And I think that's the most important thing in the beginning of drawing, that you really try to understand detail and look at it closely. Because what happens when you draw and you're in that moment and you're observing something tightly, that you really create a connection and you ground yourself to the medium. You're in that moment, you're looking at something, you're understanding it, and that way it gets kind of really into your head and you understand it. And that's the foundation for everything. You know, if you don't understand how a detail is constructed, a feather or the shape of a head or say a garment, a button, whatever, yeah, then you're never going to be able to represent it in your own designs later. And it will come very naturally to you to implement all your remembered details once you've done studies of real things. Now let's try to do a drawing of this wonderful goose here. And for that, of course, I'm taking my sketchbook, start a new page. And first I need to think of how this is going to sit on the page. Yeah? As I said, do I want this full frame or not? Do I want it more in this area? I think I'm going to zoom out a little bit to give it a bit of negative space. And what is very, very important when you do a drawing, that you try to get the general proportions onto the paper first. So don't try to draw the head here or the feet first and then make your way and more and more. It is really important that you draft an overall composition first in a few lines. And with that, you could also use your pencil, let's say a very fine one, let's say a 5H, you know, that is very, very fine. See? Hardly can't see it. Yeah? So I'm drafting now the bird roughly onto here. Yeah. And this is only a very quick sketch, of course, because we're going into details. And it is very important to understand that it's not about representing the entire thing. You know, you can choose what you decide to put on the paper. Because after all, you're the artist, right? So, whatever. So there we go. Here's your quick draft. And now I'm going to take another pencil, my favorite ones. Oh no, this is a B. It's a medium one. This is good to kind of confirm some lines. See how much darker it is already? Yeah. And once you have done that, you can actually add maybe a softer pencil and give it some shading. I'm doing, of course, a very quick drawing. You know, you might spend an hour or two on a drawing. I spent, when I was at university once, an entire day just drawing a single shoe, because we had to draw it photorealistically. Yeah? That, of course, takes longer. But what I'm doing now is just a quick sketch to show you kind of how to use the pencils and how to get some shading and some volume. And looking for my, oh, that is the 7B. This is the softest one, the 7B pencil. Yeah? And I want to give it some dark lines in here, some volumes in here, and all this. And even if you decided to abandon this and just concentrate now on the head, because you say, well, I'm more interested in the head of this bird, you know, the rest is just not my thing, or I'm not so intrigued by it, then that's fine, because after all, you're an artist and you're drawing, and you're deciding what you're focusing on. So, yeah, some details on there. can also go into this if you say, I'm going to give it some smudge and and then you can go into it and color it in the next step, or you use a Sharpie to outline, or a fine liner, you know.